This episode was sponsored by the Geopolitical Insight and Education Foundation. Want to find out more? Check the link in our show notes. Welcome to another episode of Legal for Tech, the podcast. So guys, you do recognize my voice. It's always Rosie here, and as I've said many times, this is just for students and young professionals who are very interested in anything that has to do with technology, and yes, it's regulation. And I'm calling from not so sunny Munich, which is a bit sad considering that we are in summer. But we are recording a very important episode today with a friend of the show. I've decided you're a friend now, Paulina, and a great friend of mine's actually. We are here with Paulina Pesch. Hi, Paulina. Great to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's lovely to see you here. And as I always say, that these interviews are not being done alone. We are actually being accompanied in the whole process of recording and also of asking questions by my colleague and great friend and editor of this show, Giacomo Di Gregorio. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Rosie. Calling from sunny Brussels.
Yeah, you're luckier than me with weather, I have to say. It's something that's annoying me. And another place that's not very sunny, apparently, it's Berlin. It's still Germany, where Paulina is calling from. Why are you in Berlin, Paulina? And how did you get to this point? Tell our listeners something about yourself so that they understand why we're friends and why we asked you on the show.
Hi, I am in Berlin because I live in Berlin, and I would have gone to Bavaria already, but stayed for the podcast to record, and I will go there later. I am an assistant professor for civil law, law of digitalization, and I put two more, data protection law and artificial intelligence law in Erlangen in Bavaria. So usually I'm there during lecture term, and yeah, we know each other from, I think, some spirit legal activities, Rosie, right? You know better.
Yes, we know each other from Spirit Legals. That's where I work, and our listeners know a lot about it because I tend to talk about it every once in a while. We did participate in the same conference as our other former guest on the show, Misha Shimel, also came to. It was called Badders. We had a lot of fun, and we talked about litigation in the field of the digital sphere. And so Paulina came very useful at hand because Paulina is also an expert in what has to do with generative AI, the training of models, and of course, how that kind of impacts upon the principles of copyright law and data protection law. And so, Paulina, that's what we're going to talk about. I'm really excited about this. Yeah. We're all laughing, we're all smiling in the camera for anyone that's just listening and not viewing. Although you can also start viewing on Spotify, YouTube, and also Apple Podcasts, I'm told. So,
And
Paulina.
I'm not only smiling for the people, I'm really excited to talk to you about the topic because like my research has focused on technologies with high impacts on data protection for a long while, but mainly on hype technologies. And the last one, or the first one, was blockchain. And any hype technology comes with so much bullshit in all areas, like from the people who try to economically benefit from them, from policymakers, from academics who misunderstand something or who also try to make some money from it. And I was very naive to think with generative AI this would be very different because that technology is better understood from the beginning and also more relevant, more useful. But yeah, I was naive, as I said, so it's hard to talk about it already, but not with you.
Thank you for the trust. Actually, I would be interested in knowing. Let's say, I mean, you said you're a professor at Erlangen University, and you probably have to teach to your students a lot about the principles of generative AI, how it works, and I'm thinking of the copyright matters. How would you explain to a group of students like us what's the matter when it comes to generative AI using copyrighted data for training purposes. Is it really using the data, or is it just extrapolating some meaning out of it? What's the difference? How would you explain it to a group of us?
Usually, I start to explain the basic functioning of technologies without making any legal assessment at this point, because I think it's important to understand how technologies work, and that's not the math behind it. But it is getting our terms correctly and understanding what these systems can do and what not, roughly. So I just start with the term artificial intelligence that is now used interchangeably often for not only machine learning models, which it was used for mainly, even though there is way more to artificial intelligence, but which is today used as a synonym for generative AI. And I try to explain to my students that we're talking only about one part of machine learning. And then I tell them about deep learning a little bit, like about the architecture, that they just have to imagine that it is very complex mathematical operations that they don't have to understand, and that are very, very long and big, and that there are parameters that can be understood as placeholders for information from training data. And that then systems are fed with training data, and there are some differences when it comes to image generators, but with large language model, it's actually quite easy to explain, for example, how the model that ChatGPT is based on is trained. It is given text as an input, and it predicts the next word, and then the output is assessed based on some goal function for a large language model. That would be that the word that the output that's suggested in the output like reflects the distribution of tokens in the training data set. And then, like I put it in a little bit better words because you caught me by surprise. But then my students understand that we have basically models that are trained to predict a specific word that is more or less likely in a specific context for a given input. And then they're very close already to understand that there is nothing like superintelligence happening there. And I also explained then that when the models are trained to reflect the probabilities in the training data, that how the creativity comes in, namely by mixing in less likely words, words that you would expect with less probability in the given context, with temperature parameters that are out of the model, and that is very hard to put these. And this is my starting point, and then we start to talk about the legal questions. And you asked for data protection law, right? And there we would always say, what's the scope of application? It's processing of personal data. Then you look, where do you have personal data? In the training data, in inputs and outputs. You see many processing operations, and then you can have an opinion, or in many cases say very clearly whether personal data are processed. I think the most controversial question, of course, very similar to the reproduction controversy in copyright law, is whether the models themselves can be considered personal data or containing personal data or not. And I would say yes, but my students can have other worse opinions.
We wanted to know your opinion on the recent German court decisions regarding generative AI and copyright. What do you think about those?
There was the let's tell the listeners what they were about. I was asked about it at the conference that Rosie just talked about, and I think we forgot to share that with people because we just assumed that everyone knows. So the OpenAI was taken to court by the right owners of song texts. It was about the lyrics of, I think, nine pieces of music, including. Um, do we have one that is internationally acclaimed, Rosie? Do you know it by heart? Because I can think of this
Do I look like someone who knows German
Schlager
songs
horror. We
by
can put it in the
heart?
show notes, and
Yeah,
you
we will
can
find
look
something
whether you
for
know
that.
some songs. There is a follow-up case that is a little bit more international, where Suno, a music generator, was taken to the same court. But yeah, the first court ruling by Munich's first district civil court, I think that's a word in English, was about song text, and you could get song text of nine songs very easily with very simple prompts out of GPT-4 and GPT-4o. I think, I don't know whether you can still access the models, but I managed to get these texts out with very simple prompts after that too. And one question that the court had to assess, and that is the most controversial, is whether there are reproductions of those song texts in the models themselves. And the Munich court actually used one of my commentaries on a relevant provision in the German Copyright Act there that is based on European law and text and data mining to make their line of argumentation. So like it's pretty much in line with what I think, and I think which was it was particularly a good thing for them to argue that if it is possible with a very simple prompt, without drawing data from other sources such as the internet, out of a model, then you can derive from that fact that what got out must be in the model because it is like impossible that the model just makes it up. Like the colleagues of mine who have other opinions on that argue that GPT-4 and GPT-4o just hallucinated the song texts. But if I asked for a song text and it comes out nearly verbatim, how likely is that? That is so unlikely that you can consider it impossible. And I think the Munich court was very good to argue like that. And many critiques say that what they don't take into account enough is what happens on the technical level. And my kind of niche or my specific profile is to look at technologies in very much technical depth. But I would never argue that that a technology and how it works necessarily change of how something is yeah something whether the it has to inform the assessment on the legal end because they argue that the models don't store like song text or other copyrighted works as databases do. There is no method to clearly put data or information from the training data in a model. Like we have limited influence on that when we train a model. It is not just a thing like we request a database to get something very specific out, and the information is kind of diffuse in the model. You cannot say, here, the song text is in the model. But I think as technical as I think about the legal questions of technologies, we have to answer a normative question. And the purpose of the reproduction rights of copyright owners and of giving them the right to say others cannot do that without licenses is that we want them to be able to economically exploit their own works if they wish to. And like reproductions without licenses threaten this exercise of the right. And so why would it make a difference whether we put something online on a website for everyone to get it, or whether we publish a chatbot that I just have to ask with a simple prompt for a copyrighted work and I get it out. And of course, there are many nuances to that. So that is a very simple case, but many people underestimate the relevance. Many people have said the Munich court, yeah, is right, but that is not so relevant. It's a very clear case, but most cases are not that clear. And after that, that Stanford Yale paper on extracting books from large language models, or from numerous large language models, was published. And I think it was Llama, but I'm not absolutely sure. The researchers could extract over 90% of Harry Potter out of the model. And when you look at the differences, why it was not 100, sometimes it was American English versus German English, or a few letters or something like that. And it is very hard to argue that copyrighted works are not reproduced in models. However, the whole legal discussion maybe focuses too much on that. Because it can be solvable in chatbots, you can filter things. But the solution for it right now seems to be, I don't know whether you have another impression, that chatbots would hallucinate more. So they would, if I asked for a song text, for example, they would give me a slightly different song text and maybe attribute it to another artist. And that is problematic on the personality rights level under copyright law. It is problematic under data protection law. And it is both ethically and legally problematic if we imagine that systems that make up more facts are used for decision making openly or as shadow LLMs. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that for now.
I totally agree with you. I mean, firstly, there's the issue of copyright and exploitability of one's work, which is, I mean, I guess that if you decide to go for a acting or a musical career or a writing career, you need to make sure that you can, I mean, make ends meet, but also receive recognition for what you do. And of course, the possibility that the work of a lifetime is basically generated in 1 minute by a system must be very frustrating. At the same time, I would like, I mean, if the system generates an entire song that is exactly the verbatim copy of an actual famous song made up by an author, I would like to say that anyone trying to exploit that song for their own gains probably will then encounter the issue that the song has been already copyrighted by the author. So there's this kind of issue of like, who enforces then the copyright, which I think, I mean, I do remember the time where probably Giacomo also has this memory. Italy had a huge issue of piracy with DVDs and CDs, like a huge issue. I think everyone had some kind of pirated DVDs at home, and of course there was the issue that someone from controversial organizations was using the possibility of copying massive amounts of data and selling them. So maybe I don't know if the copyright issue needs to be solved at model reproducibility level or simply at the selling point level. Maybe AI companies should simply not just be left profiting from the products of their copying, but maybe there should be I don't agree with the licensing system, but maybe a type of taxation system. So like if you then use it for your own gains, maybe there should be some kind of redistribution. So yeah, I'm interested in knowing what you think about it. We were also discussing about it earlier, about the issue of licensing, because licensing comes from the kind of assumption that if you want to use my material, you pay me a fee and then you can use it. That's the concept of license. Whilst I the concept I was referring to is the concept of taxation, which is you can use my material, but because that creates kind of a negative externality in my right to perform or to produce content, then there is a type of redistribution that is state operated. So I would say it happens at a different moment. So I would be interested in what you think about licensing. Is it feasible? Is it feasible to apply it as a blanket type of norm, or should it just be applied to the output rather than also the training? What do you think about it?
Very good question, and I think it touches upon problems that I don't have a final solution for. But I think it is important to differentiate two things. The first is copyright relevant uses of human creation, so of copyrighted work. That is reproductions, making available to the public of the copyrighted work. For example, of the text. And if it's only a part of the text, that text would have to meet the criteria to be protected as as a copyrighted work too. And I think that is not really arguable, and that there is not much controversy about when or if a text or copyrighted work is generated or reproduced by an AI model that touches upon the copyright of some creator or copyright owner, and then it makes sense to have licenses for. And I think the AI companies would be very happy to have a licensing system that serves kind of a one-stop shop or something. The other thing is what you described as negative externality. That is a very good way to put it. That is a problem of competition by AI. And the thing is, copyright law does not protect me from competition. Any use of copyrighted work will, like any information spreading, let's say, will result in other people competing. If I put my my painting in a museum, other people will see it, they will compete with it. And that is not something that is relevant under copyright law, because we have to keep in mind the constitutional background of this. Even if we don't like what's happening, information is free. So the use of information is also not governed by copyright law. The only reason why text and data mining is like regulated under copyright law is because you always require one copyright relevant use of copyrighted works to perform text and data mining on them, namely one reproduction. You need to digitalize a book or a painting or a photo or whatever to automatically extract information from it. But this extraction of information, it is like a digital version of reading it. And I think that using the mere information in copyrighted works is also basically machine learning, performing machine learning on them, feeding it into a model. It's not a classic text and data mining case where you see, oh, this word has been used 22 times in that book. Or where you can really read the output, but the information goes in the parameters of the model. And this part is not problematic under copyright law, and I think it was a very bad decision of the EU regulator to allow right owners to reserve their rights on that. Because no one should have the opportunity to reserve rights on the use of information in their work. Sorry, that's not part of the copyright. Like when people negotiated these rules, they were not foreseeing that they would become so relevant for AI. Now, no one would declare these right reservations for TDM until generative AI came. So, but what do we do with it? The real problem here is two things that are actually rather a capitalism problem. First, can we really create the work of a lifetime with AI? My clear opinion on that is no way. And AI will not become that good. Um, all that artsy content, all that art that comes out of the sets who come out of AI is bullshit. It lacks soul. You can see it, you can feel it. Maybe you can now generate an image of a person that doesn't give people the chills with the uncanny valley problem that that looks now very realistic. But when it really comes to creative work, AI cannot really do that. And the problem is rather that AI slop is replacing people. Like, I think people who translate books, which is extremely hard in novels, but is a job for trained people for a reason in other areas too. They are now supposed to use AI translators. There is a word that I heard at a conference that I learned about. It's machine translationies. It refers to the structural deficits of machine translations. And I cannot tell you whether it is possible to overcome those, but what's definitely not possible is to take a novel with a peculiar language of the author and just machine translate it. It's way more difficult to really try to understand what the author thought about it, why they chose this form, and how to translate this form into another language. I saw yesterday, I think on Instagram, a video of someone who said Amazon thought it was a good idea to use an AI voiceover. This AI voiceover was pure bullshit. The translation made absolutely no sense. And I think if work like that, even if AI models get a bit better, if it really can compete with the better work of humans, then we just see that the market malfunctions. And we have to solve that differently. Another problem that I have with all these suggestions to give copyright owners money for the mere fact that their work is used for training, no matter whether they are reproductions or making available to the public, is that they overestimate their impact on the value chain. Largely, I had to tell people from one publisher that feeding more and more of their really good books of really smart people into a model will not make the model more differentiated or better. But the more data you feed the model, at some point, it just gets more flat, more average content comes out of it. It doesn't get better anymore. And with the images, it is particularly interesting because I can take a really nice photo, let's say one that is copyrighted not only under German law, where also shitty photos are protected, but under European law, so it meets the requirements for copyright. And then hand that to AI companies. They can do nothing with that without someone putting a nice text that fits the image, that describes it well. And image generators are trained on image and text pairs. And that is important for the value chain. And why do we pay money then only to copyright owners and not to the people who put the alt text on the internet? So is that really fair? I'm not so sure about it. I think we have a general problem with creative people struggling to make money with their super valuable work, and it's particularly valuable in times where all kind of countries go a little bit more on the authoritarian side. But yeah, I think it's not the solution, and it doesn't lie in copyright law.
I loved your explanation of how adding more knowledge or taking away some pieces of knowledge from the model actually, as you said, they're very, very specific and very difficult mathematical operations and theorems you'd said at the beginning. And when we are in this situation, of course, there's the issue that if you take away a piece or if you add too much of another piece, the whole mathematical balance is unsettled to the point that probably the output will result in being something that is not more optimally usable than the one you had before or the one you would have had without taking away the piece or without adding something. And I think that's a huge problem that we have when we have kind of some specific content being picked out of the model. So what's happening right now with copyrighted material, but also with some kind of personal data, is that the data is literally picked out of the model. And that creates issues, as you said, because the kind of result of that is that the mathematical model doesn't work anymore. So you have then a lot of hallucinations coming out. And that's a problem from data protection perspective. Because if you take away the copyrighted material, the likelihood is that then when you ask a question, the model is going to hallucinate or give you a false information. Um, is that um, is that like what the issue would become if we don't administer the issue of copyrighted material correctly?
I think the problem of memorized training data. Sorry, I didn't switch off my bell. Is a problem that also comes a lot with these huge, overly complex AI models that we all use. It is way more likely that when you use a very a complex model with many parameters, that it memorizes more of the data. What exactly it memorizes and whether it becomes well at certain tasks, it's another question. But what we also never think about, or what is out of the debate, I feel like, is that we are using models that are hyper inefficient. Like if we look at our subscriptions, it's particularly true, but also people who use the models also for coding token based and pay based on tokens. The AI companies provide them for way less money than that costs them. And I don't know why we always expect to use these models forever for this price. And I think we are still in the process of learning also that for some tasks, the models are not that good, that they come with certain legal issues, and that what we really use the models for and want to use the models for, we use smaller models. So the memorization problem might also become way smaller with that. But anyways, hallucinations are always a problem of generative AI models because any kind of, I mean, it's not creativity. It is rather the imitation of creativity. These models imitate creativity by mixing in some words, for example, that are less likely in a specific context. And you can also translate that to other forms of data. And when you do that, you necessarily get out some incorrect information in the output. And how bad that is largely depends on the use case and which data are affected and who uses the model. And with general purpose models that are just made available to the public and that anyone can use, you can think of many risky situations, like from the models. I like my favorite example that I always take. I learned from a project colleague about it for hallucinations is the case of Martin Bernklau, who asked Copilot, who is Martin Bernklau, and then learned that he escaped from a psychiatry and molested children or worse. And actually, he reported on those cases. And I mean, he will not use that information in a bad way, but imagine someone that uses ChatGPT to make it a little bit easier to go through some applications or to decide whether to invite an applicant. And we have not understood well enough what kind of information can get out of these models and what the transparency behind it. So might someone get the recommendation not to invite Martin Berndklau? Might someone get the information that he is a rapist? We don't know for sure. And we also don't know what people do with it. And this touches upon this whole all the questions also of human oversight under AI regulation or under data protection law when it comes to fully automated decisions versus just decision support systems, and yeah, and also on ethical questions of decision making. And it's particularly horrible if we imagine all these hallucinated little reports and decisions being in databases of law enforcement agencies and just those data being used for automated decision making, maybe with Palantir. So there are enough low quality data that are used, and it doesn't get less with hallucinated generative AI outputs.
Paulina, when we have the issue of a person receiving an output that says their name. So, for example, I had this lovely experiment with ChatGPT. I asked them who I am, since I really like. I have a profile on LinkedIn. We have a podcast as well with Jack. So technically, it's not like I'm an unknown person on the internet. You know, you can find me if you search me up on Google. And it was hilarious because apparently I was a painter in the US in the 1920s, and then I died of tuberculosis, of syphilis, either or. It was a
Oh,
very
I'm so
bad
sorry to hear
way
that,
of
Gina.
dying. Yeah, resurrected quite well, to be fair. I'm feeling good now, but yeah, it's been a tough time. No, but my point being, can I go to ChatGPT and say like, look, you have some data about me, that's personal data and it's inaccurate, so please fix it? And do they have to comply with it from a legal perspective, or do they just probably want to fix it because it's not nice that they have inaccurate information?
Actually, this is a nice anecdote, by the way. And I would have to know what you exactly prompted and what ChatGPT said. But actually, if I just use the Google search and I use this in introductions on what's personal data and what is identified, which data relates to identified persons and which to identifiable persons, I often use these examples of people that just have the same name. If I Google colleagues of mine that have very common names, I always get someone else out. So I don't know about your name. I think it seems not so common to me. And the question is there another, or has this person existed? Then we could also say these data are not understood as relating to you as a living person. So that's a very specific case, kind of. But let's assume, like I always asked the models also for people, and in the beginning, before they were connected to search engines, you would only find something about lifetime professors, for example, in the academic um, um, uh, realm. I would not find myself, sadly. And I looked for one colleague who is an expert in IT security. He's a colleague at FAU. And I think it was ChatGPT that said, yeah, he a professor in Erlangen, all true, an expert on IT security, also true, and on operating systems. And that's not true. I mean, he probably knows more about operating systems than you and me, or at least than more than me. But yeah, this is not true. So what could he have done about it? It was clear that it didn't come from the internet, but from the model itself. because there was no online search. And then the question is, what does data protection law grant here? You have the rectification right from the GDPR. And there the question is, do we have to force AI companies to take out specific pieces of data from the models, to delete it, to perform some kind of machine unlearning? Like AI companies always say, this is impossible, which is not true. It can be impossible for some data. It is usually very cost intensive, so it's they don't want to do it because it's tricky. But also from a data protection point of view, like not looking at the specific individual, but on the broader issue, it is easier to extract the remaining data from a generative AI system that machine learning has been performed on. So maybe when we don't find anymore the false information on my colleague, we rather find other information about people, whether false or true. Same with copyrighted material. And I think for chatbot systems, where like it would be fine also to use filters. But I think I don't feel like I don't know about filters and filter solutions to say how feasible that is. I
From
think on
a
request you could do that, right?
from
You
a
have to
legal
store the
point of
personal data.
view, what would be your nutshell solution to this?
I would say it is usually because the GDPR is a risk-based or follows a risk-based approach, enough to reduce the risks of the data of the concerned individual being processed, and that I favor filter solutions for systems where feasible, and I think you can do that in a GDPR-friendly way because the filters also have to include the personal data in some way. But otherwise, one would have to argue you have to get out data out of the models. But practically, how important is that? The models that are released publicly, where the filter in the system, like ChatGPT, doesn't help, anyone can take, and they are copied also. So I think it just doesn't make such a difference. I think it wouldn't make so much sense to exercise that right. But I think we could definitely think about asking Meta to take out specific data out of Llama after asking them whether the data are in the model and say, okay, delete it before release. But I think it wouldn't be very successful, or Meta wouldn't make it very easy to get the information whether it's in the model. Probably they would say it's not. And then if it
An
is,
issue. I have
lucky.
an issue with taking the data out of the model though, because I have like throughout time we read several papers. They've been published. There was one from MIT, one from I don't remember who it was. I think it was someone at Columbia. Anyways, there were a series of papers, especially from American universities, but also a couple from European here, that basically looked at the problem of, and they had like little models that they were training themselves with data so that they could see what happens if you take away the data at a smaller scale and without the issue of I have no clue what data is in here because I have no clue what your initial training data was because you don't want to disclose it. That's the issue that we have with Matt. Um, and others. Um, the problem that they found is like the system doesn't understand or like has difficulty in understanding that if there is no data corresponding to a specific query, they can say, I don't know enough about this. Because it's that's like I read one of these papers was very put it in a very nicely way. Doubting is a human trait, which is potentially a good way to summarize the issue of if I take away the data that I am painter that died of syphilis or whatever kind of sickness it was. The issue is that if the next kind of connection isn't directly to my LinkedIn profile or to the fact that I have a podcast, the risk is that the connection is going to be to another hallucination, to another fake fact. So the problem that I have with taking away data is that if you leave a hole in between, that hole is not going to be filled with actual information. So the issue of data accuracy, if you have a database, you say, please make this correct. You can just delete the wrong data and add the right one. But in models, it's not that easy to do, or at least that's what one of the arguments has been.
It makes sense to me in general that it is not necessarily at the best interest of the individual to get specific information out, as much as it's not at the interest of others that we get out information from the models if other information is easier extractable. Hallucinations are also another issue. So just because I take information out of a model because I argue you cannot process it, or because I argue this information is false, this doesn't guarantee me the model doesn't spit out false information or other information about me. The question is also how will that develop in the foreseeable future? Because now we have these, as I mentioned before, hyper complex models that are fed with every kind of data that the companies can get their hands on. Like, what did the report say? Meta trained with porn. Meta trains, as we know, with social media data and chatbot interactions and whatnot. And of course, Meta has lots of valuable data, but I think we learn more and more that it is not so beneficial to train with more and more and more data. I think also for the legal tech tools, for example. As far as I'm concerned, many of those were fine-tuned with journal articles and legal commentaries and whatnot to make the model fitter for legal tasks. And I think we understand more and more that training is not the best way to increase the suitability of a model to a certain domain. Like if I put a commentary like third edition and later fourth edition, and I have like limited control over what the model learns, that is way worse than a model that uses retrieved augmented generation, has a nicely structured database behind it, and like a system that is has some instructions, what is relevant, what is up to date, and so on. So I don't know whether this problem of data being retrievable and being retrieved from models and being stored in models will remain the same. But we will probably always we will always have the problem of models generating false information on people, whether there was shitty training data with false information stored in the model, whether a model reproduces data in an incomplete way or out of context, or whether a model kind of fully hallucinates information and makes them up. And I think then the regulatory issue is particularly to carefully look at the use of the models, because lawyers always have these fantasies about human oversight. And it's a nice ethical concept for sure, but we don't know, we cannot say generally that this works. People have automation bias. Most users don't understand what they use. It's not an artificial intelligence problem even. We talked about the other day about credit scoring. Credit scoring was performed on, I would say, rather complex algorithms that were, however, fully transparent, but definitely not understood by all of the people who would make decisions based on the credit score. And people don't have a big tendency towards checking model outputs, and lawyers have the tendency to produce very generalizing ideas on that. For example, the whole explainability thing that always triggers me. We need explainable AI, we need interpretable AI. The terms are kind of mixed up or used differently. I don't want to say there is one right way to understand them, but actually, when you do tests on specific user groups, specific technologies, and specific user scenarios, sometimes explainable AI just makes automation bias worse. People think, oh, this system is explainable, so I trust it even more. I click yes, and then I go home. And most of us wouldn't understand what an explainable AI system says. Also, it works worse, so it produces worse outcomes. That's why explainable AI is not used so much. And also, for large language models, let's say I have a really good large language model. I'm a lawyer at court. I want a draft for my decision, full decision, like tells me the facts of the case, tells me, like suggests a decision with all the reasoning. I don't have to understand how the tokens were wandering around, like how the input led to a specific output, because that is definitely based on one logic, namely statistics. That is not the logic that the decision making can be based on the legal level, but we can fully check the text for mistakes in the text, for legal mistakes, for false facts. I'm not saying that I believe this is feasible and this should be done, but I don't think it's a problem of black boxes, for example. And I think we have to be very precise about the problems we talk about and the solutions we think about, and we will have years and decades of unfiddling the terminology and understanding what cards mean when they say AI, or sometimes they use self-learning systems for when they refer to AI. Do they now also mean large language models? Because the large language model is not automatically learning from the bullshit we type in. That wouldn't be too good. So yeah, I think there's lots to solve for us. So we have a job, Rosie.
That's very useful. And as my last question, I was going to go on the we have a job, because I feel like a lot of students, maybe some of yours as well, have this question like, probably, will I have a job in 5 years' time? Will I have a job in a couple of years' time if I'm closer to graduation? And what happens if my job is strongly influenced by the advent of technology? That's obviously, it's not about the black box, and I agree with that. But I don't understand why maybe I'm being set aside on a position because there has been an AI decision maker behind it, a person that hasn't checked properly. And I would say that sometimes HR recruitment is not exactly at its highest in trying to reverse and automate decision making process. So my question would be like, how would you address the issue maybe posed by a student? How do I make sure I have a job in a couple of years' time? Because I think we have had a very interesting conversation about how AI works and how to regulate specific parts of it. But at the end of the day, there are people whose entire lifetime basically is being decided through an AI process. So as long as, like, we say, okay, it's not because of the explainability, there's still bias, there are still people making biased decisions, but how would you in some way reassure this person coming to you and said, what am I going to do? A decision is going to be made about me and I do not know why.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think students can be concerned for two reasons. Firstly, for the one that you named, that they are subjected to decisions based on AI, or to just what AI companies do without regulators properly enforcing the quite good regulatory law that we have. And the other worry that they have, the other concern, is that they might be replaced by AI. For the first one, that would really call for regulators to have a close look at what happens in companies, what is used for decision making, which is hard because many people use shadow LLM. That means maybe their employer even tells them not to use AI, but they still do it. And I think to an extent it is a very human thing to do and very understandable also. And there is probably the most important thing to educate people and to make sure that humans make decisions that are led by some basic humanist values, which is a huge challenge these days. The other thing is, will we be replaced by AI, or how can I use AI or not in studies? And that is also important, I think, because I don't know how it is in other even EU countries, to be honest, though I hear from colleagues they have similar issues, but the law studies in Germany are packed with exams and with legal areas, with legal provisions that are relevant to what they do, and there is very little time to work on your soft skills and on basic methodological and skills and communicative skills and so on. So there is a big temptation to use AI to outsource the kind of work that makes you actually learn law, to learn to apply the law, that makes you a lawyer, that also gives you confidence in law, and that is ultimately also fun, like reading and writing text. If you don't like it, maybe do something else. But yeah, this outsourcing things can be very problematic. So we have to take care of that at the university, and we have to give students, like, we just have to explain to them or make them understand how many qualities they have that AI will never have, that particularly large language models can never replace, and how much it is about finding something that's really fun for you at work also. And it's very hard to do that in the structure of the law studies with Staatsexamen, with the state examination in the end. But I think we have to teach more the things that we kind of should have taught students way more in decades, like logic, argumentation, um, communication skills, social skills. Also, we have to explain AI to them, how it works, what are the power games behind it, which logic do the markets follow, so that they can make an informed, educated decision on when to use them and assess the risks of using them for themselves. What we don't have to do so much is to teach them prompting, because you know that better than me, but you can come to a law firm and just be handed a list of prompts. No, we have to give law students more confidence than they have, I think, in their own abilities, and to really make them able to compete with AI, which I think will be rather easy in the foreseeable future.
Started off talking about generative AI and how the whole system works, maybe from a technical perspective. We ended up with university reform, which is something that I'm not sure Germany will ever embrace, to be fair, especially in the legal sector. But I can tell you from our perspective, Giacomo and I are also very familiar with another country that will never embrace the concept of university reform, and that's Italy, of course. Giacomo is very agreeing with this idea. Yeah, he's nodding. Yeah. So, Paulina, thank you so much for this interview. It was really interesting to talk to you. It was very interesting to kind of see your thought process behind those few quotes that were cited, let's say, from the Landgericht München. And yeah, we will put a couple of links in our show notes, as you suggested earlier as well. One will be to
I send you a compendium.
I expect you do. We will definitely share with our listeners some of your let's say topics exactly, some of your texts, some of your articles that we have all read, my boss included, I'm told. uh, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us today on the Legal Protect the podcast. Giacomo, thank you for helping me with this interview.
No problem, as always.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thank you for having me. It was really nice to talk about it. I hope it was coherent because it's really complex topics. And yeah, connect on LinkedIn, ask follow-up questions. Critique is welcome. And yeah, hope to talk to you soon again.
Yes, and our listeners will find also a link to your profile, both in our show notes and in the post that will describe this podcast. So, guys, follow up. Thank you so much. And this was all from the Legal for Tech, the podcast.
This episode was brought to you in partnership with DG Beetle. DG Beetle helps privacy professionals to stay up to date with the most important European documents in the AI, data and digital space every day. Curious to know more? Check out the link in our show notes.